My son-in-law's name was Marcus. He liked to say it slowly when he introduced himself to people. Marcus AI, like the name itself, deserved a pause. He wore pressed shirts to backyard barbecues. He corrected waitstaff on wine pronunciations. He called me the in-law at his own wedding to a room full of people and laughed like it was charming. I smiled that day. I've been smiling at Marcus for 11 years. I was out of bed before my phone stopped buzzing. It was a Thursday morning in early April, just past 6:30, and the number on the screen was my daughter's cell. She never called that early. She texted. She sent voice memos. She sent pictures of my granddaughter eating yogurt with both fists. She did not call at 6:30 on a Thursday. I picked up before the second ring. She didn't say hello. She said, "Mom." And something in that one word, the way it came out thin and small, like she'd used everything she had just to dial, told me everything I needed to know before she said another word. "Where are you?" I asked. "The parking structure. At work." A pause. "I have Lily with me. My granddaughter was 22 months old. Stay where you are," I said. "I'm coming." I found them on the second level, near the elevator. My daughter, Audrey, 34 years old, a registered nurse who had worked double shifts through a pandemic without flinching, was sitting on the concrete floor with her back against a support pillar. Lily was asleep in her arms, cheek pressed against Audrey's shoulder, little fist curled under her chin. There was one bag beside them, a canvas tote with a broken strap stuffed too full, a small blanket hanging out the side. One bag. I didn't say anything. I crouched down, took Lily without waking her, and got her settled into the car seat I keep in my back seat. I started keeping one there when Lily was 4 months old, just in case. Audrey didn't move until I came back and held out my hand. "Come on," I said. She took my hand and stood up, and I could feel her shaking. We drove for a while without talking. I knew better than to push. Audrey has always needed a few minutes to find the words, ever since she was small. I used to sit outside her bedroom door when she was upset, just so she'd know I was there, and wait. I did the same thing now, just with the highway instead of a hallway. Finally, she said, "He changed the locks." I nodded. Last night, while I was on shift, he texted me at 11 that he was restructuring the household. Those were his exact words, restructuring the household. I kept my eyes on the road, and his father called me into the office yesterday afternoon, right before I was supposed to clock out, and told me my position was being eliminated. Said the clinic was going through a staffing reorganization. She laughed, but it wasn't a laughing sound. "I've worked there for 6 years. I helped them get their Medicare certification. I trained their last 3 intake coordinators." "What clinic?" I asked, even though I knew. "Hargrove Family Medical." "Dad? Marcus's dad, he runs it. 3 locations." She looked out the window. "Ran it, I guess. I don't know anymore. I knew the clinic. I knew it better than Marcus knew it. I knew it better than his father knew it, though neither of them had ever thought to consider that possibility. Here is something I have never told my daughter, not because I was keeping a secret from her, but because it never seemed like information she needed until now. I have been a silent partner in Hargrove Family Medical since before she met Marcus. Let me explain how that happened. 26 years ago, a woman named Sandra Hargrove came to my office. I was running a small commercial real estate consulting firm out of a 2-room suite in downtown Raleigh. Just me and one part-time assistant, nothing impressive to look at. Sandra wanted to open a family medicine clinic. She had the medical license, the vision, and a location in mind. What she didn't have was capital, credit history in her own name, or anyone willing to take a chance on her. Her husband, Franklin Hargrove, had the credit. He also had opinions about how the clinic should run, which staff to hire, what hours to keep. Sandra had spent 12 years watching him make decisions and calling them hers. She came to me because we'd gone to the same church for years, and she knew I had helped 3 other small businesses find their footing. She wasn't asking for charity. She was asking for a structure. We worked out an arrangement. I would hold the commercial leases on the properties, all three, as the clinic grew, under my LLC. Sandra would operate the clinics. She would pay me rent at a fixed below market rate, with a portion of profits redirected into a shared account we both had access to, structured as a management services agreement. On paper, to anyone who looked casually, Hargrove Family Medical was Franklin's operation. His name was on the business registration, his signature was on the bank accounts, but the ground under the building? Mine. The lease agreements? Mine. The management contract that governed the terms of the entire operation? My signature, my LLC, my renewal rights. Sandra passed away 9 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. Her son, Franklin Jr., Marcus's father, the man who had just fired my daughter, had been running the clinics since then. He'd been running them the way men like him always run things they didn't build, loudly with the assumption that no one would check the foundation. He had never checked the foundation. I took Lily to my neighbor Helen's house. She's retired. She adores Lily. She asked no questions and made no fuss, and then I drove to my home office and opened my files. I want to be clear about something. I did not go looking for a weapon. I went looking for facts. There is a difference, and it matters to me. I am 63 years old, and I have learned that the truth is almost always sufficient. You don't need to build a case when the facts are already in order. You just need to be the one who actually knows what they are. I pulled out the master lease agreements. 3 properties, the original Garner Road location, the Cary office they'd added in 2014, and the South Raleigh clinic that had opened in 2019. All 3 leases ran through my LLC, Whitmore Property Holdings. All 3 had renewal clauses that required my written consent to continue past their current terms. The Garner Road lease was up for renewal in 47 days. I pulled out the management services agreements Sandra and I had signed in 2003, updated in 2011, and last renewed with Franklin Jr.'s signature because I'd had my attorney send it to him as a routine matter in 2022. He had signed it. I have the DocuSign record with the timestamp and his IP address. I sat with those documents for a long time. Then I called my attorney. Her name is Rosalind, and she has been my attorney for 18 years. She is not the kind of person who wastes words, which is one of the reasons I've kept her. I explained the situation. There was a pause. How much notice does the management agreement require for termination? She asked. 30 days. Another pause. And a lease renewal on Garner Road? 47 days. So if you were to send termination notice on the management agreement today, the clinic would be operating without a valid management contract before the primary lease comes up for renewal. I said, yes. Rosalind was quiet for a moment. And you want to proceed? I want to understand my options, I said. Then I want to proceed. She told me what I needed to know. I thanked her and hung up. I called Audrey next. She was at my kitchen table with a cup of tea she hadn't touched. I need to ask you some things, I said. And I need you to answer carefully. She said she would. Did Marcus ever ask you to co-sign anything? Loans? Credit accounts? Anything in both your names? She was quiet for a moment. Then, there were a few things. When we bought the house, and there was something a couple years ago, he said it was for a business line of credit through the clinic. He said it was routine, that his dad's accountant had suggested it. Did you see the paperwork? He said he'd email it to me. I don't think I ever got it. I wrote that down. Audrey, I need you to pull your credit report, all three bureaus. Can you do that today? Mom, what's going on? I'll explain everything, but I need you to pull the report first. She called me back 2 hours later. Her voice was different, harder, quieter. There were 4 accounts she didn't recognize, 3 credit cards, and 1 business line of credit. The business line of credit had a limit of $40,000. The current balance was $31,000. Her name was listed as a co-applicant on all 4. She had never applied for any of them. I called Rosalind back. Now we had a different conversation. This is the part where people might expect me to say I felt rage. I want to be honest. I didn't. Not exactly. What I felt was a kind of cold clarity. Like when you're driving in fog and then suddenly you're through it and the road is just there, plain and visible and exactly where you knew it would be. Marcus had been using Audrey's credit as collateral. His father had fired her, probably figuring that a terminated employee has less standing to complain about benefit paperwork, less access to internal records, less reason to look closely at anything. Get her out before she looks too carefully. That was the logic. Neither of them had considered that there was someone else who might look closely, someone who had been looking closely, quietly for 26 years. Franklin Jr. called me 4 days after Audrey was fired. He was warm, paternal, a little too relaxed. He said he'd heard Audrey was going through some things with Marcus and he wanted to reach out as a family friend. He said he hoped there were no hard feelings about the staffing changes, purely operational, nothing personal. He said he hoped I understood. I told him I understood perfectly. I asked if he had a few minutes to meet in person. He said, of course, any time. I suggested the following Tuesday at the Garner Road Clinic, 10 a.m. He said that worked great. I arrived with Rosalind. Franklin Jr. was already there when we walked in, sitting in his office with a cup of coffee and the particular expression of a man who has never been surprised by anything because he has never imagined that anything could surprise him. He stood up when we came in. He put out his hand. I shook it. We sat down. Rosalind set her briefcase on the corner of his desk, which he didn't like, but he didn't say anything. I told him I was there to discuss the management services agreement and the property leases. I watched his face while I said it. He frowned. The management agreement. That's just a formality, Ruth. That's a legacy document from when my mother was getting things started. That doesn't really have any bearing on. It was renewed in 2022, I said. You signed it. He opened his mouth, closed it. The Garner Road lease is up in 43 days, I said. I don't intend to renew it. The coffee cup went still in his hand. I'm also sending formal notice today that the management services agreement is terminated, effective 30 days from today. Rosalind has the paperwork. Rosalind placed the documents on his desk. He looked at them. He looked at me. And then he did what men like him always do when the ground shifts under their feet. He smiled, a little too wide, and said, Ruth, I think there may be some confusion here. I'm not sure you understand how this business is structured. I structured it, I said. He stopped smiling. Sandra and I set up Whitmore Property Holdings in 1998. I have held the leases on all 3 locations since the beginning. I have the original agreements, all renewals, all correspondence. I also have the management services agreement you signed 3 years ago. I paused. And I have your signature on documentation that lists my daughter as a co-applicant on financial accounts she never agreed to. The room was very quiet. That last part, I said, is something we'll be discussing separately, with different attorneys. He started to say something about lawyers and misunderstandings and sitting down together with everyone's accountants, and I let him talk for a moment. the way you let a radio play in another room. Then I stood up. The notice of termination has been served, I said. You'll hear from Rosalind's office about the lease. I'd suggest you consult your own counsel about the credit issue, and I'd suggest you do it soon. I picked up my coat and walked out. Audrey was in the car outside. I had asked her to wait there, not because I wanted to shield her, but because she deserved to hear it directly from me, without lawyers and paperwork in the room. I got in the passenger seat. She was watching my face. "It's done," I said. She asked me to explain everything, so I did. All of it. Sandra, the leases, the management agreement, the structure I'd maintained for 26 years without advertising it. I watched her face move through surprise and confusion and something that looked at the end like a very complicated kind of relief. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked. "Because you didn't need to know," I said, "until now." She was quiet. Then, "Did you know? About Marcus, I mean, before all this?" I thought about that honestly. "I knew he was careless with other people's things," I said. "I didn't know the extent of it." She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry I didn't look more carefully," I said. "Sooner." She shook her head. "Mom, you came." Marcus's attorney sent a letter 2 weeks later trying to characterize the credit accounts as jointly managed household finances. Rosalind's response was thorough and unambiguous. We filed a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and a civil suit for unauthorized use of credit. The credit card companies were cooperative once they received the documentation. The accounts were removed from Audrey's credit report within 60 days. The Garner Road Clinic location was leased to a different medical group, a women's health practice that had been looking for space in that area for 2 years. Hargrove Family Medical consolidated into their remaining 2 locations, which they now lease from a commercial real estate company at full market rate. Franklin Jr. did not renew his membership at the golf club that summer, according to a woman at my church whose husband plays there on Saturdays. The divorce was not simple, and it was not fast, but it was thorough. Audrey's attorney was someone Rosalind recommended, a woman who had handled similar cases and did not appear to believe in unnecessary courtesies. Marcus retained a great deal of confidence throughout the process. He retained somewhat less by the end. I don't say that with pleasure. I say it because it's true. Lily turned 2 years old in June. We had a small party in my backyard. My sister drove up from Wilmington. Audrey's best friend brought her 3 kids. Helen from next door made her lemon cake that Lily apparently tried to sit in. There were balloons. Lily shrieked at each one like it was a personal achievement. I watched my daughter that afternoon. She was laughing at something her friend said, holding a paper cup of lemonade, wearing a yellow shirt she'd bought herself the week before. She looked like herself. She looked like the person she'd been before 6 years of someone else's atmosphere had slowly convinced her that she was background. Audrey is enrolled in a family nurse practitioner program now, online mostly, so she can keep working and be there when Lily gets home from daycare. It's a 2-year program. She does coursework at my kitchen table most evenings, and sometimes Lily sits across from her with her board books, very serious, turning pages and occasionally announcing things. People ask me sometimes how I knew it would all work out. I want to be honest about this too. I didn't. I knew what the documents said. I knew what Rosalind could do. I knew my daughter, and I knew she was stronger than the situation she was in. That's what I had. That was enough. I've kept property for a long time, long enough to know that ownership is not the same as presence. You don't have to make noise about what you hold. You don't have to announce it. You just have to be patient, keep your records clean, and know, really know, where your name is on the page. When it matters, you'll know when to say it. I've been thinking about what Marcus actually believed in those final weeks before everything came apart. He believed that presence was the same as ownership, that showing up, putting your name on a door, speaking with enough confidence, that those things constituted something real and permanent. He'd watched his father operate the same way for years, and it had worked, so he assumed it would keep working. That's the thing about structures built on assumption. They hold until they meet something solid. I don't think Marcus was born careless. I think he was taught that certain things didn't require his attention: legal documents, the origins of agreements, the history beneath the business he stood inside every day. He was taught that those details belonged to other people, smaller people, people whose job it was to keep the machinery running so that he could focus on the more important work of being visible. And so he never looked. He signed when asked. He assumed when not told. He built a life out of not needing to know. What he didn't account for was Audrey. Not the Audrey who had gradually gotten quieter over 6 years of marriage, who had stopped finishing her own sentences around him, who had started apologizing for opinions before she even expressed them. He thought he knew that version well enough. What he hadn't accounted for was where Audrey came from, who had raised her, and what that woman had spent 26 years quietly building underneath everything he thought was his. That's what I want to sit with when I think about all of it. Not the legal outcome, not the paperwork, not the look on Franklin Jr.'s face when Rosalind set those documents on his desk. What stays with me is something simpler: that the work I did quietly, the agreements I maintained without announcement, the records I kept clean for decades, none of that was done in anticipation of this moment. I didn't build Whitmore Property Holdings as a weapon. I built it because Sandra needed someone she could trust. And I believe that when you can be that person for someone, you should be. But choices accumulate. That's what I've learned. Every decision you make with integrity adds to something, even when you can't see what it's building toward, and every decision made with contempt for other people's names, other people's credit, other people's quiet contributions, that accumulates too. Marcus and his father made dozens of small decisions that each seemed manageable, even clever in the moment. They added up to a morning in April when everything they thought they controlled turned out to belong to someone else. Audrey is not the same person she was 2 years ago. She's sharper now, more direct. She finishes her sentences. She's learning in her nurse practitioner program to trust her own clinical judgment, which is, I think, not entirely separate from learning to trust herself in other rooms too. I watch her with Lily, and I see someone who knows exactly who she is. That didn't happen because things worked out. It happened because she made a phone call when she had one bag and a sleeping baby and nowhere to go. That took more than most people understand. And everything that followed, the credit dispute, the lease termination, the divorce, all of it required her to keep choosing every single day to stay clear-eyed instead of retreating back into something familiar and smaller. Resilience isn't a feeling, it's a practice. You don't find it waiting for you somewhere. You build it the same way you build anything worth keeping, one careful, honest decision at a time. I keep my records clean. I show up when called. I know where my name is on the page. That's all it was. That was enough.